Mark Childs and for David Howard for attending. Okay, Liz, do you want us to restart recording?
Yeah, okay, just started.
Lovely. As again, welcome everybody and Happy New Year for hopefully a better New Year this year. Okay, first item then is apologies for absences. Liz?
We've only received one apology from Councillor Chris Holly.
Okay, any other apologies from anyone? Okay, item number 2, disclosures of interests. Any member want to declare any interests at all? No, good. Prohibition of whipped votes and declaration of party whips. Are there any declarations to be made? Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. If we can go through page by page for you to look, you've all had a chance to look at it. So it's page 1, page 2, and page 3.
I'll move you, Chairman.
Thank you, Paxton. Is there anybody to second that? Okay, thank you, Hazel. And Tony, you've seconded as well. Lovely, thank you. Item number 5, public questions. Are there any, Liz?
No, we haven't received any.
Okie dokie. And item number 6 is update on the management of the COVID-19 performance monitoring. This item is verbal. So over to you, Dave and Mark. I don't know who's going to start.
Mark, do you want to say a few words first?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what I should say has been covered by Dave in the preamble anyway, about how fantastic staff, colleagues in other organisations and the public have been so far. And so far, it's 2 years, isn't it, best part? We are currently in the midst of the Omicron variant and the effects that's having. They are dramatic. We've got through the Christmas period, which is a start. The scenario, the plans, or the suggested rate of progression is that we're, I don't know, a week, 10 days behind, away from what the planned peak of infection is. We know that the infection is not as serious to people who are infected from this variant, but the fact that it is so infectious is the real problem. A large number of people, both citizens and staff, getting it all at the same time, threatened in various scenario planning that they do to overwhelm services. We're not there yet. Through a lot of hard work, some serious working on contingencies and emergencies, and people moving around from one job to another to cover staff leave because of either they've got COVID or they're having to isolate because someone they're living with has got it. We've done as much planning as we possibly can, as far as I can see. There are always times to tweak and days to review where you are and that sort of thing, but it seems to me we are as ready as we can be for whatever scenario comes over the next week or so. And there are hints that maybe the worst case scenario won't happen, but I don't think I would regard them as anything more than hints yet, and nothing to hang a coat on. So we just prepare for the scenario that we expected, and if it isn't as bad as that, well, thank God. But we just need to prepare for that. So we've got hopefully to the end of the month to know whether we've got through the worst of it. Even after that, though, there is still an issue, and we carry on being affected by COVID. And we are hoping, I guess we're all hoping that sometime before the next council election, we might be approaching normality. But who knows? Who knows? But there we go. I'm sure Dave would add more detail, but I've just joined the rest of you in saying phenomenal thank you to everybody involved. I will touch on one other thing, and that's I guess a number of you were at the health board presentation yesterday afternoon, and I cheekily, I know I'm a cabinet member, but I sat in and listened to it anyway. I thought it went very well, to be honest. But one, it was really good that it happened, and it demonstrated the closer working. It's symptomatic of the closer working that has taken place between all partners, and particularly with health over the last 2 years, that they were able to come and be so open with what they were trying to do and answering questions. I thought the questions were absolutely sound, about primarily focused on availability of health services and well-being and the factors that lead to ill health, rather than cancer treatment or hip replacements or whatever, which I thought was very encouraging to hear, and very encouraging for the health board to hear, because we want to move to having a healthier population in the end. I know it's a bit of a side issue to the main COVID stuff, but I thought it was worth mentioning.
Important.
Dave may well have more detail to add.
Thank you, Mark. Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll add a little bit, but great context setting from Mark there. First thing to say is apologies that you haven't had a formal written report again. I was hoping, and I flagged last time, that I did think we'd get a report to you on this occasion, but actually the way Omicron has played out, it has just been impossible for us to get it done in time. I am expecting something this month, so I may well circulate something. Part of the challenge is getting the narrative explanations around things. The numbers are being generated, but clearly someone's got to sit down and do the narrative, and often that falls to the heads of service, and as you can imagine, they are here, there and everywhere at the moment. But if I get something that I think is fit for purpose and understandable, I'll circulate it outside of the usual routine. I am hoping that, as you've all described, we might return to something a bit more normal, going forward now, and then we should be able to return to our usual reporting approach. But I'll give you some of the headline things that will build on some of what Mark has described. It is playing out in terms of some of the modelling in the way that we were expecting, but it's worth just reminding ourselves what that increased infectivity rates that Mark's describing, what that's meant. We have had community rates of transmission up at the 2,000 per 100,000 people. If you remember right back at the beginning, the trigger point to being worried was 25. We're now talking about 2,000. The positivity rate, the trigger point for being worried was 5%. The positivity rate has been between 50 and 60% in recent times. And as Mark's rightly flagged, as it's played out at the moment, the touch wood, the seriousness of the consequences of catching COVID, particularly if you are double vaccinated and boosted, they're considerably less. So, even if you need treatment, the treatment is likely to be, less likely to be hospital treatment. Even if it's hospital treatment, you're likely to recover quicker and be able to get, back out. Not in all cases, but it's a significantly improved position. But where we've really struggled is, again, as Mark has flagged, it's the workforce impacts of, yes, but if you have, if you're positive for COVID, or if you're, close contact and needing to isolate as a result, you can't then be coming into work to, health services or our care services where we're supporting the most vulnerable and risk infecting those individuals. So that's where we've had the real challenge, and it has been dramatic, and it was a dramatic change even since the previous meeting. I think following the week following the last meeting, we suddenly saw the escalating rates that we were anticipating, and then were very quickly having to get into, really dramatic contingency planning, even in those early stages. It's slightly changing in terms of what we were expecting. We were expecting rapid escalation to a high peak, and as Mark has said, it's always been the case, and it is still currently the assumption that we're working to, of a very high peak around third week of January. And then what we anticipated then was a rapid, decrease in rates. So it was, how could we build sufficient contingency to survive that catastrophic period where you had ridiculous numbers of staff absent, potentially more vulnerable cohorts of the population catching it as well, then with increased health and care needs as a result. How could we survive that period? What Mark described as a hint, there's a possibility that peak is already more with us than we were actually anticipating at this stage. But if that's the case, what's likely to happen is the peak will last longer. So it might not have got as high, and it might already be with us, but it might last longer as a result. So we'll have more of a sustained period than we otherwise would have, again with a depleted workforce. Again, we're not sure about that at the moment, but there are some indications that might be what's playing out for us. So it's leading us to us having to slightly adjust our contingency planning for, okay, might not be quite as bad at peak, but how do we manage for a longer period with depleted and as a result remodeled offer again. That we're kind of having to play both arrangements out, to be ready to manage both. The other thing that I'd flag is, and this is a case for optimism, but also again caveated with, but it might still be to come. What we haven't seen at the moment is a significant jump of infection into the most vulnerable cohort of our population. So for us, that's particularly care home residents, but any of that older age group. There has been a jump. There was a jump over Christmas from a very low base, certainly for the older population rather than care homes, but older population in the community around the Christmas period. Rates of infection amongst the older ages, 70, 80, 90-year-olds, they tripled. And you kind of expect it. It was the Christmas period, with all of the pleas for people to be cautious. There was still, families getting together, wanting to see older relatives, doing all the right things, I'm sure, around lateral flow testing and all of that stuff. But nevertheless, there does seem to have been a connection with, we saw a rapid increase at that point. That appears to have dropped off now. So again, that adds weight to, it seems to have been associated with that Christmas, Christmas Day and that Christmas week. What is encouraging is we haven't seen a significant connection between higher infection rates for that cohort of the population and then significant problems around hospitalisation and treatments and deaths. So that's encouraging. That suggests that the double vaccination, the booster, those arrangements and the focus on that, which a much higher uptake for those older age groups, did act as a protective factor in the way that we'd all anticipated, plus people being cautious and etc. So all of that's room for optimism for me. We still haven't seen, whilst we've got we do have staff in care homes, small numbers of staff in lots of care homes, testing positive, consistent with the high rates of community infection. Again, we haven't seen a significant jump into the care home residents population. And if you think back to last year, the thing that really caused us a problem was when we had high infection rates amongst the staff, so then had a depleted staff workforce, but also high rates of illness amongst the population in care homes. and then a real struggle to be able to get healthcare support around those individuals, you know, either through admissions to hospital, because, you know, all the pressures on hospitals, but more, how do we keep these individuals in nursing homes, etc., and still mobilise that in-reach healthcare support for those individuals. That was the thing that really challenged us around keeping those care and nursing homes running. We managed it, but it was really hairy, and you'll remember our discussions about that back last year. We haven't seen that repeated this year, which is good. You know, that suggests that all of the learning around the protective measures seems to have had an impact and held so far, which is really good. I'm still cautious about, you know, if that leap happened as a result, you know, if we still got more of a peak to come and it did spread more into that cohort, I think that will be the bit that will really test our contingency arrangements above anything else. But touch wood, you know, that doesn't happen because of all of the measures that are in place. Part of keeping that, you know, those protective arrangements around care homes, we're obviously really cautious around where there is any sign of a potential outbreak, that admissions to those care homes, you know, we're obviously much more cautious about. It's not true to say that they are automatically closed, you know, because you can still admit to a care home depending on the risk assessment around what's your understanding of why some staff have caught COVID. Is it in the community? Have they then been removed from the workforce? Is there any other indication that there might be? But in truth, we're really cautious about that. So on any given day at the moment, 50% of our care and nursing homes across the region are effectively closed to admissions. And that is part of the means by which we're, you know, trying to ensure that we don't see that jump across to that particularly vulnerable cohort. That seems to be working okay. The negative consequence of that, of course, is it is slowing down, you know, potential discharges from hospital where somebody is waiting for, you know, a care home or a nursing home placement. So there is a backlog of individuals where we've completed the assessment. We know that you know, they're waiting for a move. They've decided where they want to go with family members, etc. And then we're not able to make the or support the individual into that care or nursing home until you know, the outbreak is you know, is deemed to be over. So that is causing pressure on or adding to the pressure on our hospitals at the moment. There's a particular area where we're really struggling at the moment. We always do, even in normal times, and that's EMI provision. So the most you know, the highest level of specialist health input into those specialist providers. We don't really have any placement availability at the moment in the region. So we've got a cohort of individuals that we're really struggling to support out of hospital at the moment. That's the most difficult area for us, very closely followed still by the pressures we have on dom care, which have obviously been exacerbated again by additional workforce shortages. We haven't seen over this period, again linked to all of that contingency planning, and we haven't seen significant numbers of continued handbacks from dom care providers, which is good. That suggests that we are starting to get a little bit more resilience into the external market, no doubt helped by the additional funding that we've made available. So, you know, that's helped with recruitment in those external for those external providers, which is good. But again, certainly in terms of Swansea, we've probably got a backlog of about 40 individuals in hospital at the moment where we're not able to source either in-house or from external providers domiciliary care for them. We did create some extra, effectively what we're describing as transition beds, so that individuals who are waiting for that dom care offer could move into a temporary care home placement whilst we were trying to sort out that dom care. But those beds quickly got used up. And in the context of the overall number of beds or homes that are closed to admission, again, that capacity just isn't there to do more of that at the moment. So that's kind of the overall position. I'm seeing some glimmers of hope, a bit like Mark. We think we are starting to see some potential increased capacity within our in-house dom care services. It comes as a result of, first of all, some a lower level of sickness absence, which is good, but also we're effectively amalgamating our long-term dom care team with our reablement team, plus with a new rostering system that's been put in place to create some more capacity from the more staff that are available. So I'm hoping that in the next week or so we'll see some movement around those 40 individuals that are waiting for some support to enable them to come out of hospital, but also we've obviously got long waiting lists in the community as well. So it's both. We've got to try and create capacity to create some some opportunity to support individuals on both sides of the equation. Again, caveated with, it's still a bit risky for us around, we create the capacity and then lose the workforce again. That creates some risks. So there's a lot of juggling going on. But as Mark said, I'm really confident that, again, due to the extraordinary efforts of, the heads of service, their senior management teams, and in particular our workforce, that those plans are as good as they can be and are nimble enough for us to respond to whatever it is that we face and give it our absolute best shot. I probably need to flag as well, I'll take a step back. We're trying to add capacity, further capacity in our in-house res care offer as well. Part of that is around the contingency plan. And I'll give you a couple of specific examples. The EMI provision that we're struggling with, if we can find both a health and care workforce, we may designate one of our homes temporarily to offer, it won't quite be an EMI provision, but a step down provision for those individuals who are waiting EMI provision. That's dependent on being able to get both health and care staff. That might enable us to get some movement on those individuals that are awaiting EMI provision in hospital, which would be good if we can do it. We're also a bit worried about individuals in the community who have the highest level of need. They're supported by the health board rather than us, but it's, for all intents and purposes, it's a dom care offer for individuals with continuing healthcare needs, and some of those packages are 24 hours a day. So if they break down because we run out of staff or the health board run out of staff, we do need a fallback provision, offer for those individuals. So in extremis, again, we may designate one of our homes as one of the places that those individuals could move into, but then we'd be looking for the residual health board staff to staff the home. But that's an absolute in extremis measure. Our preferred option around all of this is keep people at home or in the care home that they already are. Don't start moving about people about if we can possibly avoid it. Across the rest of our in-house provision, again, and it's about having an ultimate contingency plan. If we had catastrophic failure anywhere in the system, can we create some more theoretical bed capacity across our other homes? We've got physical space to do it, but again, it comes back to, can we move enough staff around to be able to do that? And that's not just in practice. That would be, are there some functions in a care home that staff other than care staff could do to then free up the limited care staff to be able to care for more individuals? So we're working that through at the moment. We're confident that theoretically we can create some extra capacity, and that will be, as I've described, contingency for wherever else things might break down, and you ultimately have to have a fallback position of, can we provide a temporary offer for those individuals? So that's being worked up as well, and will be. I expect I will hear by tomorrow. Yeah, it's in place. This is the number of beds that we've got, in reserve, ready for that offer if we need to do it. But we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it because, back to our ultimate position of, we want to support people where they are, apart from in hospital. Where people are in the community, we want to keep them in their home, whether it's a care home placement, or for the vast majority, it's care at home. One of the reasons for flagging that res care offer is that almost inevitably, if we had to make use of that extended res care offer, we'd have to draw staff out of day services. So it would have an impact on what is already a reduced day service offer. And that's not a pain-free option, obviously, for those individuals that are receiving daycare. So again, we don't want to do that, but for a very short period, in absolute extremis, that is one of the options that we'd potentially have to utilise, because we've got staff that are used to providing care, albeit in a different setting. In terms of social work, our social work workforce have been further depleted by COVID infection. But again, it plays into Mark's point around the actual impact of that infection doesn't appear to be as serious for the majority of people. So for the vast majority of our social workers that are having to isolate because of an infection or because they're a close contact, they're able to carry on working at home virtually. So we haven't seen a depletion, any further significant depletion of our social work capacity. But bear in mind, our social work capacity was already depleted. So it's not that it's all hunky-dory. It's just that it's not significantly worse as a result of what we're facing at the moment. I think that's probably it from me as the kind of overall highlights of where we're at in terms of pressures and managing those pressures.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you both, Mark and Dave. Questions? I see Paxton's got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, David, what you're describing is a situation, obviously, which has got fraught with difficulty. But you recall at the last Child and Family Services meeting, we had quite a long discussion in that meeting about recruitment of staff and where you could recruit from, and the pool that you could recruit from. Slightly different, I suspect, in adult social services. I'm not quite sure, but I suspect the qualification requirements are not so intense in many respects, but you know that better than me. I'm just wondering whether you got a problem, particularly in domiciliary care with the private companies as well as ourselves, in terms of getting sufficient staff in those areas and being able to recruit to replace as is necessary. I don't know if you've got this. What I'm asking really, have you got the same problems of staff shortages within adult social services as you had in child and family, I think?
Yep, no. So we do have the same issues. You're right. They play out slightly differently. Definitely issues around domiciliary care resilience. It's particularly in the for our externally commissioned providers. Hence us going early in the region on uplifting providers to enable them to pay at least the real living wage. That's clearly become a policy, commitment going forward. But nevertheless, we'd already jumped and gone at risk on that, really, to try and support external providers as best we can to build a bit more resilience. But we still have a significant shortfall in the number of carers that we need within that external market. And I suppose it'll be a twin-pronged approach that we'll be taking forward, in that we do want them to support them to recruit more, and we'll make every effort to do that. But at the same time, we'll be looking to increase our in-house offer as well. We're proving reasonably successful around our recruitment efforts for our internal staff, and our retention rates are, pretty good. It's mostly sickness absence that's causing the issue for us, rather than significant deficit in numbers. And we are successful when we need to recruit. We're having to again balance it, though. We don't want to just move people around, so we don't want to just rob from the external providers and make their situation worse. What we really want to do across the board is recruit new entrants into the care market, and clearly a competitive wage and a host of other things that we're working on nationally around having a career pathway and all of those, parity of esteem with health, all of that stuff. That'll all need to play out if we're genuinely going to build resilience. And we do need to change the model of dom care as well. It's pretty much the only community service where your kind of every minute of your day is monitored for, have you delivered this bit of personal care? None of the rest of community services works like that. So we want to move to more of an outcome-based, almost a caseload type approach of this is the group of individuals you or your small team are supporting. You work as a small team to support those individuals, rather than almost a task and finish approach. You go in, you do this, you leave, you rush to the next place. That's a shift in approach, and that requires investment as well, over and above investment just in making sure we pay the real living wage. So we'll be wanting to work up both nationally, regionally, and locally. How do we move to that different approach? And that will add to making it a more satisfactory job that's properly recognised in more equivalent fashion to the way other community services are. We do also have problems with the social workforce, similar to children's services. So we can't get as many social workers as we need to across adult services. And there might be areas where we particularly struggle. AMPs are an example that are quite similar to child protection social workers in terms of difficulties in recruiting and retaining that group. It's not as acute a problem as we're experiencing in our child protection teams, but there is an overall deficit in the number of social workers available across the piece. Therefore, it does play out in adult services as well. And some of the rethinking around, well, how are we going to deliver our services then? Do we maintain such a high reliance on social work qualified staff, or do we move some of those functions to differently qualified staff and be able to build a bit more of a resilience and potentially an improved offer, by doing that? So it's a bit of a work in progress, Paxton. And again, we've talked before about in the particularly around the backlogs, but compounded by workforce shortages. We are outsourcing some of our work as well, in a way that we never have in adult services. We are continuing with that, and potentially, given this further wave, we might need to extend that a bit further for a bit longer. But I'm keeping my powder dry on that, because I'm still hoping that we were caught up by the end of this financial year in the way that we'd originally planned. I'll stop there, Paxton.
Thank you, Dave. Mark, to add to that answer, to Do you want to
Yeah,
add?
I just add a tiny bit. Thanks, Sue. Yeah, I was at a meeting yesterday where exactly the same issue was raised by a dom care provider, a commissioned independent domiciliary care provider, saying that you know how careful the council must be, but by implication the health board as well, that when we are recruiting new people into care rather than recruiting from the independent care providers. I mean, obviously, we have in recent months coordinated our recruitment, tried to do it together. I think there needs to be a more sophisticated level of recruitment, whilst there is a difference in pay scales and terms and conditions between all three. I mean, health is better than the council is better than the independent. I think the increasing of the pay rate that we've taken, off our own back has narrowed that difference, but there's always terms and conditions and other stuff as well. So it is important that we all work together and with Welsh Government and anybody else that's interested to expand the workforce and to give them the career that Dave was talking about, rather than and a level of responsibility to undertake their job in the best way they can, rather than do X, Y, and Z when you get to A, and you do ABC when you get to the next one, and whatever, and the way that it's currently commissioned, which has worked after a fashion up until now, but the whole shift has been made in how we approach care in recent years, and this has been left behind. So we need to do that as well. But yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
I think, to be fair, there were some quite strong views expressed in Child and Family Services, because David was there, would have heard that, and certainly there were concerns about whether we are sort of poaching from one source and so depleting that source, etc., and getting that balance right. I think that was the concern I think we had within Child and Family Services.
Thank you, Paxton. Tony,
Yeah,
you have.
I think there's been a realization that we're all in the same boat. So we can't just fix our individual bits.
So it is a matter of increasing supply rather than swapping supply around, isn't it?
I mean, in this emergency situation, there is a bit of juggling supply around, but in the medium term, yes, it's got to be about increasing supply.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. Tony, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, just to comment on the last bit of the conversation. I mean, I think what that dialogue reminds us of is that we probably need to have a re-engineered relationship between the public and the private sector in terms of what are the things that we're going to be doing collaboratively, and what are the things that, for all sorts of reasons, particularly with large organisations that are multi-backed, as it were, are remain competitive. But I mean, we can come back to that when the dust has settled. I mean, the thing I wanted to double check I'd understood properly from Dave's very useful report was the number of people awaiting discharge. I think the figure was 40, Dave, that you gave. Is this the total, or is this 40 waiting for a particular service? And whatever it is, where is it tended to be concentrated? Is it in the two large hospitals of Singleton and Morriston, or is it scattered around other bits of the health estate?
Yeah, I'm giving approximate numbers, so don't track them, and they change on a daily basis. But basic position in our region. So I do our region. There are about 280 individuals who have been deemed by the health board as medically fit for discharge. So they have had their acute treatment. You know, they should be capable of being cared for elsewhere, preferably in their own homes. Yeah, so that's the overall figure in the region. Whenever you do an analysis of, you know, forget arguing about are they actually medically fit or not. You know, there's always a bit of that. But if you just took that number, whatever that number is at any given time, whenever that's investigated, you know, independently or otherwise, it always comes out at about 50% of them are not moving on as quickly as we might like as a result of how hospital processes work. And then about 50% are as a result of how community services are currently configured. So we can safely assume that about 140 of those individuals across the region, it's not just in Swansea, about 140 of those individuals could, if our community services were organised with sufficient capacity in a particular way, be supported out of those beds, you know, today, tomorrow. The system isn't organised as well as it needs to. We haven't made all of that transformation yet, and we have particular problems about capacity at the moment because of the reasons that I've described already. So that 140 is an assumed 140. In the region at the moment, or the last time I saw the performance figures, which would have been earlier this week, we had 80 individuals that had actually been referred through to the various pathways that are the community, supported community discharge. So whilst we assume there's 140, there's only actually 80 that have been referred. That suggests again that some of the processes perhaps aren't, you know, as efficient as that, and you kind of understand it a bit, you know, a bit increased inefficiency, because if you're in hospital at the moment, the reality is you're being moved around all, you know, you're not necessarily working in the usual ward that you work in. It's a really high turnover because they're juggling all the staff absences as well. So we probably expect a bit of that, you know, but there are at least 80 individuals across the region who should be supported elsewhere, or could be supported elsewhere. And with capacity, I would expect them, even though community services haven't been totally remodelled, I would expect us to have, in normal times, to have been able to support those 80 individuals quicker. Of, you know, the figures that I was quoting earlier was there are about 40 of those 80 who are waiting for domiciliary care, a domiciliary care offer. It might be a long-term offer, it might be a reablement offer. So of the 80 that were referred earlier this week, 40 of them are waiting for dom care. The majority of the rest are waiting for an EMI bed across the region. I couldn't tell you, Tony, how many of them were Swansea waiting for an EMI bed rather than the Talbot residents waiting for an EMI bed. But usually the kind of 2/3, a third, or 60%, 40% usually plays out. So I'd be, you know, confident that we'd be saying there's probably between 15 and 20 at least individuals waiting for an EMI. So they're the two key areas of capacity causing the problem around increased delays at the moment. Dom care, whether it's long-term or reablement, that's about 40 of the 80. And then for Swansea, probably about 15 are likely to be waiting EMI provision. Hence our bit about, can we get our reablement service back up and, you know, combined with our long-term service to try and shift the 40? And if we could make a kind of temporary kind of EMI offer in-house, we might be able to take some of those 15 temporarily as well. That's where we're focusing the efforts, Tony.
Thank you, Dave.
Great.
Mark,
Thanks very much.
do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to elaborate a little bit, because as Dave said, there are 40 waiting for a domiciliary care package. And obviously, they're not the only people waiting for a domiciliary care package. There are nearly 200 people, I don't know the exact figure, in Swansea, I believe, waiting for a dom care package. So there's those 40. There's 5 in the community that are considered to be in crisis, that need one urgently. There's about 125 or 130 people in the community who we know would benefit from one, but they're at the lower end of need. They're starting to have a need, or just starting to have a need, that sort of thing. Or maybe the need is fairly recent. And then there's another sort of 40 plus who are in some kind of what they call bridging situation. So they probably had some kind of reablement and have come towards the end of the reablement and are now waiting for a package of care so that they can that reablement becomes worthwhile, if you know what I mean. So although there are 40 in hospital waiting for a package of care, the package of care queue is bigger than that 40.
Thank you, Mark.
And that is significant. Nearly 200 is significantly greater than normally what we'd expect to operate on. We'd expect a queue of maybe 40 or 50 perhaps, but that is significantly greater than we'd like to see.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Mark. Jeff, you've got a question?
Yeah, perhaps sorry to be so perhaps vague actually over this. I don't think I certainly can't appreciate the pressures you're under anyway. I must admit, I was at the seminar with the health board last night, and I must admit I was impressed really with the openness and with regards to the problem that you're actually encountering, and what shall we say, hopefully the closer working relationship between yourselves and the health board and so on. One of the big problems they've actually got is the backlog that's grown under COVID. Mark actually said earlier that hopefully we'll be in a position before all things being, shall we say, good, before the next election and so on. What exactly what are we gonna class as good, or are we really, is good going to be classed as the repercussions of COVID for a longer period than that?
Shall I start on that, Dave?
Yes, please, Mark.
I mean, I'll start by saying where we were before COVID, I don't think we would class as good. And I think there's a whole review about health and social care and how we present it, of which we've already touched on a bit of it, our approach to how we commission dom care and what it's for and that sort of thing. We've got a whole lot of other stuff. So to say it's going to be good, I mean, we can all hope, and I do hope, that things get significantly better. And that is what I hope. Whether it'll be good is another matter. I think we've got some time after COVID to sit back and learn a lot of lessons, some of which we learned on the go as we've got better coordination with other people and better understanding of other people's difficulties and needs as well, other organisations that is, and other organisations' capabilities as well, like the third sector. And I think that there is certainly within Swansea, or rather the West Glamorgan area probably, a desire to see how we come out of this with a better organisationally better focus on individuals, and better able to, as I said about the health report, keep people well and address people's well-being rather than address people's needs or illnesses and that sort of thing. We had been taking what looks like now baby steps towards that over the last couple of years. But that's a journey that we need to accelerate in the next couple of years. Whether we'll actually get to good or we certainly won't ever get to perfect. How long it'll take us to get to good, I don't know. But I think we need to accelerate our efforts to get there together, and with involving the public as well, involving carers, involving people that receive care. Much more than we have in the past as well. So there's a job of work to be done to review where we are and how we go forward. Once we got time to draw breath, I think I would like to see a period of just being able to draw breath and people catching up on their leave and recharging their batteries as well at some point along this before we sort of take the next great leap forward.
Thank you, Mark.
I agree.
All right, Jeff. Are there any other questions? Can I thank you both for the presentation, and again re-emphasise the fact how grateful we are to the staff for all their efforts. I can't emphasise enough. I know it's said loads of times, but we are very fortunate in Swansea. Okay, we'll go on to item number 7 now. and that's the work programme for 21-22. And
I'm
can
going
I
to leave
just,
you now, Chair, if that's okay.
yeah, thank you, Mark, for your attendance.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
See you, Mark.
Am I all right to go as well, Chair?
Can I just, before you do
Yeah, go on.
both of you, confirm that the item from the 2nd of March is the update of the West Glamorgan Transformation Programme.
Yeah,
Is that still going ahead?
I think it'd be good if it can. Can I, because there do need to be changes in line with Welsh Government effectively are moving to a 5-year funding model with some different expectations of the RPB. So it'd be really good if we could have that item. I don't want to absolutely commit the regional team who are working at the moment. They are fully involved in helping manage the emergency situation as well. But can we assume it will? Because it would be a really good item to have. But I'll just need to, or between me and Liz, we'll just need to check with the regional lead to make sure there is capacity to bring something for that meeting, Chair, if that's okay.
That's lovely. Thank you, Dave. Can I also remind panel members that we have a joint social services panel looking at the draft budget on February the 14th, just to remind you, and that's at 1 o'clock on that day. Are there any questions on the work programme? No.
No.
Thank you for your attendance. Liz, can you stop the recording?
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Sue.
Thanks now. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.